You and I have likely learned sharing disciplines. We've all learned and have been conditioned to contribute in some way. But this lesson focuses on the natural giver, the one who is naturally bent to give of their resources. They don't need any training to feel that natural impulse to give of what they have. You might be the type of person that God just keeps on giving and blessing because He knows that you're just going to keep on giving to bless other people. And let's study those people among us and those natural sharers as we look at them and find out whether or not you are one and don't even know it. Let's remember this as well. It's a disclaimer that we've had from the very beginning. From all these verses, we all have different levels of giftedness and responsibility in each of these, what we call gifts or areas of service. We all have responsibility. They are indeed commands. We can't avoid that. But we each have different levels or a higher God-given giftedness in at least one of these areas. Keep track of these scores, the way you evaluate yourself, and we will have an ending class, a conclusion, to help you see a bar chart of your strengths and weaknesses. It'll be fun. So be sure to focus, as I say, on the area where you are most gifted. That makes the most sense. Be most effective in where you're naturally gifted. And here's the question. Are you a natural server? Look at these verses with me, if you will. In this class for tonight, we are looking at the word gift of giving as serving. Or, no, not serving, sharing. That's their service, but they're sharing. And we're doing it based on a word definition of Romans chapter 12, verse 8. And that verse says this: the one who contributes should do so with generosity. If you have the ESV, you're looking at the word contributes. Now that word in Romans 12, verse 8, translated contributes, is translated gives in the NASB and the New King James Version. And that word is metadidomi. That word is also used in these two passages, which the context reveals much about its implication and its definition. Luke 3:11. He answered and said to them, he who has 2 tunics, let him give or contribute to him who has none. And he who has food, let him do likewise. That's the same word in Romans 12:8. Ephesians 4:28, likewise. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather labor. Get to work, working with your hands what is good, that he may have something to give or contribute to him who has need. I thought about this earlier, and I'll go ahead and say, I'm going to have a lot of fun dealing with the content of this class. So if you don't have fun, that just makes one of us, and it's not my fault. I'm going to have a lot of fun discussing these facts, and I hope that you enjoy hearing them as well and be blessed. We are, in this class, not talking about the contribution on Sunday morning, but it's not excluded, but we're talking about the characteristic of the sharer that is not determined by how much he or she has learned to put into some kind of contribution plate or tap on the phone on Sunday, but we're focusing on the natural bent of the sharer to share with others. They are givers. There are plenty of people who give either some or much out of their abundance, but the sharer can more easily always give from what he or she is using or what he or she would personally soon use. We can't overlook passages like Romans 12 and Hebrews 13:16, not at all. It reminds us that we each have a responsibility in this. But obviously this seems to be more natural for some. And it's those people that we're examining tonight, putting under a spotlight and seeing what they're made of. Let's discuss these 5 characteristic strengths of the sharer or the giver and see how much it relates to you. And I'll say your true self, your true self. And the biblical example of this, we will go to 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. Now, I want to say something briefly about these evaluations that we're giving to ourselves. If you have an email that is associated with the church, you may have gotten the email of this outline to you, and that way you can print it off. Either now or later, you can go back and view the video for the answers, or you can take a scrap sheet of paper and just keep notes yourself. Add these numbers up as we go. But I said something last week that resonated with some people, and I want to extend this just a little bit. I want you to remember as you're rating yourself that 0 means it never applies. It just never applies to you. But that doesn't mean that you're a lost soul. When you rate yourself a 10 because it always relates to you and that you identify greatly with it, it doesn't mean that you're perfect in that area either. It just means this is a simple way of evaluating your strengths and weaknesses in these regards. So let's look at point number 1, the characteristic of a sharer. They quickly volunteer to meet needs when they are revealed. Similar to a server, but a little different as well. 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 5. Moreover, brethren, we make known to you the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. Macedonian, helping the Judean brethren. That in great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability, and yes, beyond their ability, they were freely willing, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive, accept the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. Whew, that says a lot. And not be only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. There are the examples tonight for the positives. As soon as Macedonia heard about the need in Judea, they were filled with joy at the opportunity of helping and sharing. They are quick to step up to the plate. Now, we're contrasting the servers that we spent some time on a few weeks ago. The servers are quick to perceive a need. But the givers are quick to respond when informed of a need or an opportunity. When a server makes an announcement of someone or some group needing something, they're typically the first ones to make a beeline to the person who made the announcement and offer their resource. How does this relate to you from 0 to 10? How does that relate to your experience? Characteristic number 2, sharers or givers know that God owns all, trusting Him to provide for them. And going 1 John style on us, they don't just know it, they know it. They're living it. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 8 through 11. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you. Givers love this verse. That you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have abundance for every good work. As it is written, He has dispersed abroad, has given to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now may He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, supply and multiply the seed you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality, which causes thanksgiving through us to God. Wow. The Macedonians recognized that any bread that they might share with someone else came indeed from God. It began with Him. So sharers don't feel like they are sharing their bread as much as a portion of the bread that God graciously provided. Additionally, sharing is not only what is proper, to the sharer, to the giver, they feel like it is what is so proper that it will then ensure God continues to bless them. Since then, God has blessed them, they need to give so that God will continue blessing. Now, I will say they don't give for that reason, but they just know that's how it works. They get something, they have to share the blessing. And I think that a hoarding society can learn much from sharers who lighten the load during hard times, right? So what about you? How does this relate? How does your view of stewardship affect how much you share and the generous spirit when you do? 0 to 10. Evaluate yourself. Point 3, sharers see sharing as an opportunity, not an obligation. 2 Corinthians 8, verse 4. I emphasize the reading of the word imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering of the saints. Earlier, we had a mini-series on the word fellowship, and that word simply means to take part in something. Now, the joke is I've had some meals with people that I'm not exactly in fellowship with. We understand that, but we're taking part in something. Well, the givers take part in the ministry or in the need of the other person when they contribute to the need. That's how they enjoy the need and satisfied met. The Macedonians begged for the favor to take part in relieving the burden of the Judean saints. They did not see their needs as an obligation to begrudgingly meet. And you've heard the illustration, and it's just a joke about a treasurer's joke, where a preacher gets up and says something like, God accepts a cheerful giver, but we will still accept it from a Scrooge or a Grouch, right? I mean, if you contribute something, we'll put it to good use, but we want what you give to be a blessing to you as well. They cheerfully jumped at the opportunity to be of best use in the lives of others. Sharers feel like they are being most useful and living out the purpose that God intended for them when they help others by giving. They want to be involved, and they look for those kind of opportunities. What about you? From 0 to 10. Point number 4. Sharers are willing to go without, but they are willing to go without joyfully for the cause when there's a legitimate need, and they've become very selective in those needs. 2 Corinthians 8, 2 and 3. That in great trial of afflictions and the abundance of their joy and the deep poverty abounded in the riches of their liberality. For I bear witness that according to their ability and beyond their ability, they were freely willing. The Macedonians gave even out of their poverty and beyond their means. Here's a key word we have to mention. Sacrifice. They were willing to voluntarily forego some of their own desired blessings for the greater joy of knowing they would be experiencing the blessing of knowing they helped others in their lives. They love knowing that what they've given is a specific answer to a particular prayer. They love that. Sharers are willing to sacrifice to meet those legitimate needs for that cause. When that takes place, they don't feel abused. They don't feel resentful if genuinely devoted to the cause. And frankly, they feel so joyous about it that they might not feel like they sacrificed as much. And that could be a problem because they might tend to give too much. We're not there to the weaknesses yet, but here we are. Point number 5, after you evaluate yourself on that, here's point 5. They'll give of themselves. And is that really what it's all about? 2 Corinthians 8:5. And not only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. The Macedonians did not just give money. They gave their hearts in service to God, and that meant the need was met, whatever that need might have been. We see this spirit also in 1 Thessalonians 2. But let's think not just in terms of money when we contribute or give. Let's start thinking and reconditioning our minds to also include the elements of sharing time. Resources, yes. Love, care, and concern. There's a great need for these to be given and received. If these characteristics fit you more commonly than not, then congratulations, you might be a natural sharer, and I encourage you to keep on growing in these. We need servers, sharers who serve this way. In the studies, we're going to continue to compare between servers and sharers, so you'll hear me make that glitch a lot. So listen closely and see if I can make a verbal glitch there. Point 2, or section 2. As with all gifts, the sharer also has some natural struggles, natural pitfalls. This is where the fun comes in. And I want to mention something again and elaborate on. If you score high on section 1, it means you are most likely prone to face the challenges in section 2. Not always. Not always. And this one was particularly challenging because some might relate to you and some may not. Each case is different. But the goal, if you score high on section 1, is to keep the scores low or steadily decreasing in section 2 so that you mature and overcome these weaknesses and keep a good heart. And we're going to look at multiple examples tonight. Point 1, a struggle of the sharer is that sharers tend to think or at least act like money is the answer to all things. Well, I'm not going to say that a godly sharer is described by the worldly view of Ecclesiastes 10:19, but I will say that sharers can easily lose sight of the spiritual if convincing themselves that writing a check can meet every need. It's hard not to think that because money is a powerful answer to a lot of things. For example, if they hear that maybe the tech department needs a $40 wire to be replaced, they'll write a check. If they hear that a building budget is too low for some preferred repair, they'll contribute, write a check, deposit. If a member needs something built for the home, forget manual labor, just write a check, pay somebody else to do it, right? I jokingly say that's sometimes too much my style. But if a member, now this is not an exaggeration, if a member is obviously in distress or sorrow or depression, why spend time searching for the right words or letting them just talk to you and cry on your shoulder for who knows how long? Just write a check and help them to see someone, maybe a good, great counselor that you know. Folks, that's not an extreme example for some who are falling prey to this pitfall. I praise all good deeds, and I'm quick to say that. I praise all good deeds, and I surely esteem the top dollar quality of good advice. But the sharer needs to be careful to not keep to keep the methods of sharing diversified, lest he or she think that money is all that is ever needed or is all that they ever have to give. We do have to be careful on that. Point 2. A pitfall here of the gift of those gifted in giving. They can fixate on funds. They can become ironically fixated on money, which produces selective stinginess and even greed in some cases. I'm careful on this because they're good stewards of money. They're so frugal on themselves, but they be generous to other people. So you know the account of Zacchaeus. I heard an interesting perspective of this recently. Luke chapter 19 is a familiar story, verses 1 through 10. Before he came to Christ, granted, he was a legal robber, selfish and greedy. Jesus came into his house and set him free from his sins. Zacchaeus clearly and instantly became a generous, responsible sharer. And so some would then say that since that was such a quick, natural response of repentance, that he already was a natural giver or sharer, but that sin was suppressing it. Now, that makes an interesting point. And if your points from that is that we might be a natural sharer deep down, but sin is repressing or suppressing us. If you make that point, I won't argue with that. Whatever you think about Zacchaeus, whatever. But it's also a good point that Christ is the one who affords us the ability to do what he's designed us to do in the first place. Zacchaeus went above and beyond to make amends, giving fourfold to those he had cheated and giving half of what he had to the poor. This is great. I want to emphasize something about Zacchaeus, though. While in sin, he reveals a common struggle that sharers can still have because of sin to some degree. I will also say that while he exited the mindset of materialism, Satan can fool givers to entering it. How does he subtly do this? Very simple. If you get more, you can give more. Ooh, that's true. But it's also very, very clever. Please don't let that spoken good intention only steer you towards materialism. A related struggle is simply that the giver is so prioritized on holding in reserve for future giving to others that they might even rob themselves and their loved ones of blessings or experiences that they are entitled to. Do not feel guilty for buying something for yourself once in a while, but does money preoccupy all of your thoughts? These are very good questions to ask. I told you I'd be having fun with this. Hope you are too. Okay, let's shift gears. This is a different one. Point 3, another pitfall of a sharer, a challenge, a trial. They can develop ulterior motives. Wait a minute, what? Giving? Giving for selfish motives? How does that happen? If you know, you might know too much. Romans chapter 12, verse 8 says to contribute, those who contribute, to do so in generosity. This is another fun word study, generosity or liberality, some translations say. To better understand the intent of the word haplotis, I would like to share with you its definition. Sincerity or single-mindedness. And I'm thinking about those who are pure in heart, the good intentioned, the genuine, the authentic. So we are to give, contribute with singleness of heart, of intent. So that's the primary meaning, and yet the word seems to be used for the secondary meaning sometimes. So lest we misunderstand how we're supposed to give, let's go back to that heart. How interesting is it that the concept of generosity and liberality is a secondary meaning? If you are giving with sincerity, you're giving then only with the other person's interest in mind. In a way, you're not even caring how they view you, because then you're only caring about the helping of the need. Now that's very interesting. So you're not giving with mixed motives. You're giving generously, not to be manipulative. And I believe that Paul's admonition is a flag to us of a potential pitfall, or else it wouldn't have been mentioned. Sharers can fall into this. Givers must resist, and you and I, when we're giving, must resist those early temptations to give expecting something in return. That's tough, because that's not giving with a proper motive. We have all good intentions. It's not always received in the right way, but that's on them, not us, right? When sharers follow down this dark path, here's how it manifests itself slowly. They might begin to keep tally of their giving. They might overinflate its worth and then develop some kind of control issue. They might then, here's an example, or an explanation. They might gauge their contribution based on how much they think that they're getting from maybe a church or people within. They might also expect some degree of blessing in the future in proportion to how much they think they've evaluated their giving. In other words, like, I can't believe you don't just want to pay off all my bills. You know how much I've contributed over the last 20 years? That's not good. And it's not as extreme as you might think. But in some of those extreme cases, let me just ask you to put yourself in an elder situation. And I'll carefully word this. What should elders do if, after prayer and study with an individual who is threatening to cease their contribution if they don't get their way, what should they do? I suggest what I would do is bid them adieu. Think about that for a while. True sharing has no sinful motives. Sometimes there are godly expectations with helping other people. This example does not exclude the times that you help a person with the intent of helping them be a better steward of their funds so that they're not in help or as in need as often. That's a whole nother story. But yes, there are godly expectations. And this is where I wanted to provide the bonus study for you. We each have our responsibilities, and we are to tend to those so that the church might not be burdened unnecessarily. With that being said, here's another pitfall, a challenge. Sharers can sometimes fall victim to pride in self, and judge others based on the size of their contributions in comparison. Well, I'd like to show a comparison between the difference in Matthew 6, the pride that we see in Matthew 6, and the humble trust in Mark chapter 12. The pride in Matthew 6, Jesus is talking about the Pharisees that are about to give, but want everyone to know it and help everyone to see just how much I'm giving to the Lord. They want people to think that they're righteous. That's the only reward that they're going to get, not anything from God. The scripture in Matthew 6, Jesus says, verses 2 through 4, verse 4, your Father sees what you do in secret, and He will reward you openly. But the humble trust by the widow who put in her 2 mites. Chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. Jesus said, assuredly I say to you in verse 43, this lady put in more than all those who had been given to the treasury. For they put in out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty, and in all that she had, her whole livelihood. I'll mention something about her later, but in this context, it seems that every individual who is exceptional in one particular gift seems to think that they're susceptible to thinking that that's the gift and that's the function within the body that's so most important that also it must become the best litmus test for gauging spirituality. I'll give you some examples based on what we've studied. Servers tend to resent others who don't get involved as much in serving. We should serve more, of course. Teachers take pride in their knowledge, but we all should learn, right? Exhorters become outspokenly upset when people disagree or disapprove of them. Sharers can think that they're more devoted to God because of how much they give. The Pharisees drew attention to their gift. They wanted others to think that they're spiritual. But when the sharer gives secretly, they can still be prone to making a private assessment of their spirituality compared to others. The giver struggles sometimes to not look down on others who share lesser amounts. That's tough. Don't do it. To all of you sharers out there, I do want to encourage you, go ahead and enjoy the blessing of joy that comes from your giving. Go ahead, but without comparing, without bragging. Go ahead and rejoice in the gift being given. That's natural. But don't compare. Okay, point 5. They struggle to receive. They struggle with receiving. 2 Corinthians 8:13 through 15. Let's read that briefly. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened. Okay, that says a lot. But as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. Okay, verse 15. As it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Now that's beautiful. Paul explained that he wasn't trying to oppress the Corinthians by asking them to share. Rather, it was a matter of fairness, or I should say godliness and love. God was blessing them now so that they could be a blessing to others. One day, they might be in need, and God blesses others to help the Corinthians. No forced taking for redistribution, never selfish motives, but merely a common love by each, for each, to meet each other's needs. That's beautiful. While sharers tend to be the ones to want to bless others, they have a hard time being on the receiving end of that. And I don't think it's because of a pride issue. It's just because a sharer thinks that someone else is in more need than they are. Godly givers need to be reminded that they are very important as well. And they have fellow servants who want to give to them. That's fine. Or fellow givers, fellow sharers. And it's not selfish. They need to be reminded. They need to hear. It's not selfish to reward the generous giver with simply the words, "Thank you so much," because that's giving back to them what they are blessed with as well. Here's a side note about the giving without a pride issue, or receiving and not letting it be a pride issue. There's no shame in working hard, doing your best, and if after all of that you still have need, give thanks to God that there are others who help meet those needs. So how do you do in some of these weaknesses? How'd you rate yourself? Some maybe it's like, yay, that used to be me 20, 40 years ago, but I've improved on these. Yay, that's good. And some of these might reveal some work yet to be. So if you are a sharer, what opportunities do you have? Very briefly, though I don't mention these on the screen, I just do only speak them. To exercise your function in the congregation, obviously contributions are a big factor. Foreign aid, domestic supplies, giving time and prayer. To help someone one-on-one, there are opportunities like financial help, financial counseling, because some people need to know how to better manage what they've got so they're not often in need. Hospitality, meals for people, giving them rides to the assembly, supporting preachers individually, those who are in maybe smaller congregations, not paid as much as they deserve, time with those who have special needs, helping with moving people's products or things from one house to another, the house that they're moving to, obviously, clothes or toys. To reach out to the lost, here are some evangelistic opportunities. Give away Bibles. Give away lunch bags with congregational information inside. Volunteer in the community, in the schools, homeless shelters for battered women and unwed mothers, and help in halfway houses. Volunteer in hospitals when you can, nursing homes, the neighborhood hospitalities. The list is endless if you really, really want to be a giver in this respect. Whew. But for those of us who are non-sharers, who really need to grow, those of us who scored low, here's some help for us to grow. Okay, I'm going to reference Romans 12 and Hebrews 13. It's on the screen for you. Those are good verses to show our responsibility. I want to add another one that I like even more. I'm a 1 John type of guy. 1 John 3:17. This is my favorite one to let all of us know we have responsibility. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, oh yeah, I went there. This is the one I'm going to. It's so bold, it's so powerful, I love it. And yet closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? It doesn't. So how can we improve these numbers if we're low in this? And sharing God's love with others by being a giver. Sharing of ours, what we have and what we would use. Number one, I know this surprises you. It's the same thing every time. Become friends with a sharer. Watch them. Discuss their faith with them and let their perspectives influence you. It's incredible. We hold on to way too much. Now, don't guilt someone else into doing this. That's not the point of it. Say, hey, that's selfish. But if they're the givers when their need is met or legitimate, then that's a whole other story. They feel they just can't hide that when they're influenced by a natural giver. Bless those people for being in our lives. Point 2, write gratitude lists. Gratitude lists. I've observed and I've surmised that people don't easily share if they don't feel they have enough. How much is ever enough? And they don't share if they feel entitled. That's obvious. A whole other sermon required on that. Or if they feel like they need more first. So start taking inventory of all that God has done for you. And I mean, really start counting your blessings, every breath, every heartbeat, everything you have. And you will see how God really is taking care of you. And this will help build your trust. This will help build your faith that God will take care of you when you give what is in proportion to what you have and within your heart reasonably as a good steward. That tight grip loosens, and it just might give to another in need what God has blessed you with in abundance. Point 3, budget sharing first. Sometimes people don't know what their words really reveal about them. And I know I've been there. I haven't said these words I'm about to say personally, but I've been in environments where this was said with much passion. So I can imagine this will really sting some chords with you. People may say sometimes, I can't give. There's no room in my budget for that. Exactly. No, Michael, you don't look at my budget. I can't give. There's no room in the budget for giving. Exactly. I know. It's easier to start right than it is to get right. But to avoid God getting your scraps, generously giving in proportion to the measure of your blessing and cheerful heart, that does not happen by accident. Whatever percent you reason in your heart as you're balancing things out in your stewardship journey, make sure you budget for giving first. Whatever percent that is. Number 4. I just thought of one thing I did not have noted, but I really wanted to say from back to point 1. Okay, becoming friends. Unlike the others, it might be harder to find a giver because they do it in secret so often, right? But you can spot them if you look at these the positive lists, and you can spot them. Go to the elders, though. And if you have good intentions and don't just want to guilt trip them into giving you something, then they wouldn't mind telling you who those people are for good intent to bless your life. Because they often don't want the glory. The mature ones don't. But they're easy to spot if you're looking for them. Okay, with that being said, let's go to point number 4. Volunteer for something that will take time. Wait, what? Yes, time, because you can't write a check for that. Not really. A amount of time each week or each month to be involved in some kind of volunteer serving capacity. Choose a cause that you value and find a service and then tend to it. Find a place to simply give of yourself, your time, your energy, your effort, and you'll be greatly blessed. All right, our last point for the night. Sacrifice something. Remember that verse that if you have 2 tunics, share. That's reasonable. It's half. It makes sense because you're not using it. Might as well bless someone else, but you have it. It's close to you. You might not alternate the next time, but let's go to the next level. It's not, I worded this very carefully. It's not a sin to give of your surplus. But we want to be more than those Jews who did. Go ahead and bless others with what you don't use anymore. Go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that either. But I have what is called a preacher's pet peeve, and I have many of them. But here's one of them properly used for this time in this class. I have a pet peeve against when people fool themselves into thinking that they've been generous when they've actually just gotten rid of their junk. If we want to take our sharing to the next level, we need to include sacrificing something to some degree. So perhaps in your budget or revised budget for maybe next month, it reveals that you want to have or that you spend some amount of money on something that you like but don't really need. Again, it's not wrong to buy something for yourself, but you know in your heart that that's a large amount of money that adds up. And you know what? Let's just decide right now to channel those funds, a percentage of those funds, into some good ministry or cause, and then start learning the joy of going without because of then the increased fellowship. Not irresponsible to give all that she had received meagerly because she gave because she to take care of her. She was being taken care of the Lord's way, and she trusted in that. Very, very good point to mention. So with all of sharer or see a lot of room to grow to become one, here's the most important, here's the harder question. What are you doing with that gift? Ephesians 4:15 and 16 says that you're a joint in the body. We need to help it function. And again, thank God for those with this gift. They've helped us out. And we need to thank those who are using that gift and follow suit. Next week, Lucian's about to come up here and share some announcements that are pertinent to this week and to this congregation that will conclude our time together. But next week, we are focusing on the spiritual gift of leadership. That's going to be fun. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll pass this microphone over to Lucian.